I just would like to remind business owners that they didn't get in the business to manage people. And so let the person who is the expert at managing people help you manage your people.
Welcome to the Self-Insurance Podcast, brought to you by CRMBC. Every week, we're interviewing industry experts, restaurant operators, and brokers to talk about the world of workers' comp self-insurance in California. It is my pleasure to welcome Heather Bischoff, owner of Upskill Consulting. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about what is Upskill Consulting and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I have been working in consulting for a really long time. I started my career as a case manager, so really got to understand the dynamics of people. I've worked in lots of different industries, and Upskill Consulting is just really about upskilling your team so that you can run your business in a really effective, efficient way.
And you specifically focus on human resources, though, correct?
I do, yes. Learning the case management skills and then transitioning all of those skills to human resources was a really smooth transition in figuring out workflows and systems and processes and all the things that businesses need to function operationally.
Which is huge. So it's one of those things that, you know, we are a restaurant self-insured group for workers' compensation. And so our members are all restaurant operators. And it's very common, I'm sure, in all the industries that you work in, but you've seen in restaurant where restaurant owners just will wear all the hats until they can't handle the hats anymore. And so sometimes, you know, the general counsel, because I was general counsel for a pizza franchise, I was also doing HR. I was also, you know, handling their kids' DUIs. I was, you know, you wear all the hats. So not that there was a lot of DUIs, but you know what I mean? You just get asked everything. And so HR is one of those things that as companies are scaling, they sometimes wait to hire a full-time HR person. And I'm sure you see this a lot. And that's where you come in as a fractional HR. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, thank you. I would say totally understand and can relate to that pain point in a business where you didn't start your business, especially a restaurant business, to deal with people, you know, issues as far as your employees. And fractional HR is something that I come in, I serve as that role, but I'm not your employee. And so I can come in and help you solve some of those employee relations issues, help you understand, you know, if I have employees, you know, calling out on shifts, what do I do? Can I make them find a cover? Can I do this? And all of those things matter because especially in the restaurant business, you need all hands on deck every shift because you're delivering a service. There's quality. There's all sorts of, you know, guidelines and requirements that need to land. And if you're short staffed, that creates an issue. And then when you have other employee issues, it can roll over. And ultimately, you're trying to avoid any type of litigation.
And we happen to know that those types of issues directly impact workers' comp claims. We find it all the time where if there's a trend where we see an uptick in workers' comp claims, we often see that there's an issue with a manager, an issue with training, something that an HR person would have been able to catch. So speaking of which, what is something that most business owners think they are getting right, but they're not getting it right?
Thank you for that question. It's a big one because I think HR is a skilled task. And it's just like, you know, I talked to a friend of mine who works in workers' comp and, you know, he always says, you wouldn't hire an electrician to solve your plumbing problem. And just because you understand some plumbing doesn't mean you understand the complexity of it. And HR is very similar. And so I think a lot of times business owners think, oh, I can just Google this, or I can just do this. I don't need to pay for HR. But understanding the complexity of employment law and all of the different things of working with people is quite a different task. And oftentimes you can be doing something that you think, oh, like this isn't going to hurt my business. And all of a sudden you've got a summons on your desk saying like you're being sued for this. And that's the thing is like, I think it's a blind spot because a lot of HR on the surface level looks like it's an administration job, but there's so much more. There's so many complexities because if you even look at leave of absences, for example, in California, there's so many different kinds of leave of absences and they can piggyback on each other. Some of them do, some of them don't, some of them are paid, some of them aren't. And so really understanding the complexity of the law and the employment regulations is a big thing. And it really matters it hits the bottom line of the company every single time.
So in a lot of objections people get about hiring an HR person is they think it's just so expensive. What's the reality of, is it so expensive? And I know you in particular, we've talked about the fact that you actually save money in other ways. So talk to us a little bit about that, about the expensiveness of human resources.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies think that human resources is a cost center. But when you really boil it down, when you're retaining employees longer because they're getting their needs met, they're going to stay. That's going to save you, hundreds of thousands of dollars years. Plus you're going to have, engaged employees over disengaged employees. Disengaged employees always cost a company more money than engaged employees. You have, just looking at systems and processes. I can't tell you how many companies that I go into and they have 6 different systems and none of them are talking to each other. So how can we streamline that and save some money? Or are there other cost savings processes that we can put in place where a lot of times business owners don't have the bandwidth to do those cost analysis of like, oh, maybe there's a better system or a better tool that I could be using that can save me $1,000 a month. Like all of those little things add up. And that's where, human resources really truly is a business partner. And also just helping to make strategic decisions about, people. Do we have the right people? Do we continue to tolerate bad behavior because it's better to have a body in a role versus have that role open, and really evaluating the difference of, what is it really costing the business to allow these types of things that we don't have time to deal with. Like there's a cost associated with that.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, is we don't have time to look at it because until you get to that point where you actually hire an HR person or an outsourced HR person, you're only dealing with it once it becomes a problem as opposed to being proactive. I know because I sat in that seat and I was handling a million things. So HR only came across my awareness when there was a problem. So you're speaking to the choir here. So our members range from, franchise owners that have 40, 50, 60 locations to smaller operations that might only be 5 or 6 stores, but it's a, $100 million operation because it's fine dining. So for smaller, so obviously the ones that have 50 locations and tens of thousands of employees, they've got an HR person already. But what do you say to smaller scaling organizations? When is the right time to really be focused on either hiring an HR person or an fractional HR?
Yes, great question. I would say once you've reached 10 employees, you really need to have somebody, even if it's on a part-time basis, because there's something that happens when you have 10 employees. They want to know handbook, sick time policies, paid vacation, holidays, insurance, all of those different things. And there's also reporting requirements for different states once you reach 10. So there's some laws that are for, you have 1 employee, then 5, then 10, then 25, and it just continues to scale up. And so there are fiscal, responsibilities that a business owner does not really want to dive into because it's so tedious. And there's reporting things, and there's fines that are associated if those reports are not completed, on time and annually.
Especially in California.
Especially in California.
It's one of the toughest. And as you know, PAGA has just absolutely plagued, especially our members, the restaurant group, because there's a lot of there's a lot of attorneys that we're really coming after. So we're very thankful for the new legislation, but it doesn't mean it went away. It's
Correct.
more than ever, the companies still need to make sure that they're crossing every T and dotting every I. And that is often a lot of the things that PAGA falls within is covered by the HR person.
It is. And it's challenging because managers oftentimes don't have the capacity either to be following up on all those timekeeping processes. And so that's where, human resources can be that cheerleader, if you will, for the managers and also help to do some of the heavy lifting. To be like, okay, let's see what's going on here. Let's work with the employee. Let's figure out how we can make this easy for them. And if they don't do it, then let's manage them up or manage them out.
Can you share with us a success story that you've had, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's not restaurant, someone that was ignoring their HR, but then finally came to you and you were able to help turn something around?
Yes, I have lots of success stories. I love the clients that I get to work with, but there is a franchise that I have done some work with, and they called me in because they were having an employee issue. And, I was able to solve that issue for them and then was able to start looking at the broader scope. And in doing so, one of the things we set out to tackle was benefits. And I was able to save the company 50 grand. Because the benefit strategy that they had really wasn't the right strategy for the business. And, just through like my own experience and looking at those strategies is doing that and then helping them to streamline their business. So now this business owner can travel internationally and not worry if his business is going to fall apart because he knows that I'm working with his team and I really am his partner in making sure that employee issues are addressed the way they need to. Compliance things are getting addressed the way that they need to. And he can still be a business owner, but he can also enjoy his life.
I love that. And obviously we're workers' compensation, so I have to draw everything back to workers' compensation. In your experience, obviously HR is the ones we often interact with, who is filing the claim, who is notifying the insurance company. And one of the things that we see across the board is when claims are not timely reported, those are the claims that often become litigated. Or when the injured worker feels like no one is caring for them and they get scared, and then so that's when they call an attorney because they haven't been hearing from their employer, they haven't heard from the insurance company because the claim was never filed. Tell me anything that you've experienced with regard to workers' compensation claims in HR.
Yes, I did some work with a staffing company. And so we had a lot of worker compensation claims because of that. And so one of the things that I always look at as an HR practitioner is, how can we get more preventative measures in place to one, lower our mod rate, but also to, give employees the education that they need because slips and falls are a huge thing. Just being aware of your, environment, reporting things, looking for those yellow signs that, slippery when wet, all those types of things. And that is one of the things where HR can really go in and look and do an assessment to be like, okay, here's a hazard. Do we have our IIPP in place? Do we have other safety things in place? And then, being that liaison essentially to work, with the workers' comp, company and the employee to make sure that the employee understands what's going on. And, is there work that they can do? Can we get them back to work? Do they want to come back to work? And just kind of being that person to help project manage the whole process because it can be really involved sometimes. And it's helpful to have somebody that your employer is providing for you to essentially hold your hand as you go through the process. It definitely lowers the rate of anything going to litigation because now you have somebody that's documented the entire process and you've had somebody that has been there kind of taking care of the employee while they're figuring out, what their healing and recovery is going to look like.
Absolutely, because ultimately we all have to remember that the point of workers' compensation is caring for the injured worker. And of course, there's going to be fraud, there's going to be things that we challenge and things like that. But ultimately, we exist to help the injured worker, but then also as a nonprofit, self-insured group, we also exist to protect our members. So having best practices, including taking seriously your HR, is a big part of the full wraparound of being a successful self-insured group. Heather, I can't thank you enough for giving us your perspective on this. It was really, really helpful. Any last thoughts you want to share with us before we sign off?
I just would like to remind business owners that they didn't get into business to manage people. And so let the person who is the expert at managing people help you manage your people.
I love it. Thank you, Heather. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for the Self-Insurance Podcast, brought to you by CRMBC. If there's a topic you'd like to learn more about, or if you have any questions, just email us at info@crmbc.com. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share, and join us again next week for more tips on self-insurance.